Good morning. I am in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, along the Susquehanna River. And as you can see, it is a rainy, foggy day here. But it's still a nice showing for the leaves. And what brought me down to the Harrisburg, Pennsylvania area is, of course, the Civil War Museum. Now, I have been reading about the Civil War for a couple of months, and I have been very impressed with the knowledge that I have received about the Civil War. And of course, that brings me back to here. And we are very fortunate to have a museum of this caliber about the Civil War. This is my first time in here. I don't expect to take too many videos. Short videos, more pictures. Certainly there are many YouTube videos out there of the Civil War, and many books about the Civil War. One author is James McPherson. Outstanding book. Possibly it's in here to buy, but I have it at home and I've been reading it. And later on I will just let you know a few things that I had learned out of there that I thought was very impressive and interesting. The National War Museum, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. My first interest, as I was walking into the Civil War Museum, was the brick walkway. And as you can see, West Virginia served 32,068. 4,017 died from West Virginia. Missouri, 139,111, 13,885. And so it takes me along the walkway. Delaware, United States colored troops served 185,000. Can you imagine that? 185,000 colored troops served, and 37,000 died. Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, 267,717, and 13,000 died. They served all the way from Texas. Virginia, of course, Virginia was the bulk of the battles. 192,924 served, and 14,836 died. As far north as Vermont, New Hampshire came down. And I'm taking a sweep of the bricks Look at all those bricks. Pennsylvania, 337,936, 33,183 died. And so it comes through here, New York, New Jersey, Minnesota. Wow, they came from Minnesota. Michigan, Indiana, Wisconsin, Illinois, Connecticut. That's fascinating. The walkway. Well, the Civil War Museum certainly has been very inspiring. It has brightened up since I first went in. And as I take a walk and I film Harrisburg, I am reminded of the cultural war that the North and the South had had for many years. And of course, the word Civil War had been mentioned many, many times until it finally did happen. Today, we have a culture war, and Civil War is being mentioned. A few years ago, it wouldn't be, but today more and more and more are saying it. So I would request, ask, advise anybody that thinks of civil war or thinks that we may be approaching a civil war, you know, to take a few moments out of their life to come down here and find a little bit about the Civil War. It was brutal. It was atrocious. The killing. It's horrible. And to have to do that to our fellow patriots, our fellow Americans, just is not right. So if you're out there and you favor a civil war, take a minute and think. Maybe there is just a way of doing all this without all that war. I'm here at Reservoir Park, just right below the Civil War Museum, up above the city of Harrisburg. I can see the Capitol from here. And my thoughts have been for quite a long time, did slavery cause the Civil War? I had been vacationing in Maryland at one time a few years ago and spoke to a woman about things, and she brought up the fact that she thought it was states' rights, that the states had a right to do just what they wanted to do and didn't have any loyalty to the federal government. I have a friend who is very adept at the Civil War, and especially Gettysburg, and he claims it was definitely the slavery issue that caused it. I, for one, never quite sure. I had said about reading James McPherson's book, and I had learned a few things out of there that I thought was interesting, and one of them was the fact that the North had such an industrial strength over the South that the senators and the representatives would get together and they'd say, hey, you know, come on, South, get with it a little bit. You know, we are a nation here, and you've got to pull your weight and start to produce more. The South, of course, then the South had cotton. So they said, well, yeah, but we supply the cotton. And that's important too. The South expected the North to supply what they needed. And of course, not only from the North, but also from England too. And it was their arrogance that made them feel that way. They were slave owners, and the slaves did all their work. And of course, the North didn't like that. They didn't feel that that was good, because the Northerners were free market, and the slavery was in competition with this free market in the North. So this had been going on a long time. Something else that I thought was very interesting was the fact that when the Confederate military wanted to increase their size, eventually they got to the poor Southerners. And the militias would come in, the state militias, and they would try to recruit these poor Confederates. But unfortunately, they didn't always have it as good as the slaves did. Maybe not necessarily the slaves that worked out in the field, But at least those that worked out in the field were able to eat and sleep. A lot of times the poor folk, it was very difficult and hard for them to do that, to find food, you know, to keep abreast of things, to keep going. And so the militia would come in and they say, well, you know, join up. And the poor Confederate, of course, they didn't want to fight. They didn't want to fight for the slave. The slaves looked down on them. They despised them. So the militia would come to these poor Confederates and they would tell them it's for the Confederacy. It's for the country. It's patriotism. It's honor. And I just thought that was just so interesting of a factor that involved the different segments of the Confederacy.